Hello and welcome back, listeners, to another beautiful episode on the Mindful Living podcast. I'm Sana, as always, there for you. And today's conversation, well, it's one that I want to approach with care, honesty, and realism. Now, mental health and mindfulness, they're often talked about in ways that, it can sound neat, calming, or even inspirational. But then for many of us, the lived experience is anything but neat. It can feel messy, confusing, sometimes frustrating, and then exhausting to even hear advice about healing. I've personally felt that many times, listeners, and I'm there with you. So today we're not here to sell quick fixes. We are here to talk about what actually supports healing when life has been hard, when self-worth feels fragile, and when mindfulness does not automatically feel safe or accessible. My guest today is a holistic wellness coach and author whose work is grounded in lived experiences, listeners. And let me tell you that her background includes navigating trauma, anxiety, depression, PTSD, addiction, significant life adversity. And what I really appreciate most is that her approach, it is trauma informed, it is non-prescriptive, and it is also rooted in respect for individual context. So this is not a conversation about doing mindfulness right. It is a conversation about building a healthier relationship with yourself, even when that feels unfamiliar or uncomfortable. So, Kerisma, thank you for being here. I'm really, really glad to have you here with us.
Having me, Sana. It's an absolute honor to be a part of these conversations with wonderful women like yourself.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much. I'm really honored. And Kerisma, let's begin with first the foundational aspect here of self relationship because um, for someone who is feeling disconnected from themselves or sometimes judging themselves or distrustful of themselves, what does this phrase of self relationship actually mean in real life?
Um, well, it's a double-edged thing. I think, my own history, I kinda thought, like, that would be all, unicorns and rainbows, like, "Oh, if I had a better relationship with if I was whole, if I was healed, that this would be the happily ever after," and then, what I discovered is that wholeness is actually about embracing all aspects of myself, and some of that is actually very painful, very difficult, that, that it wasn't a matter of, there wasn't, like, how do I say it? Insignificant reasons why I didn't have a very strong relationship with myself. There was actually there was there was real reasons for that. Some of them were external in what I was, taught and encouraged by my family and society, and some of them had to do with the internal environment and my need to have a lot of distance from what was going on inside because when I was younger, I wasn't prepared to deal with that.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. And I think, I don't know, I mean, why is this, or maybe I've never, maybe honestly, put any efforts to understand, but when we are young, like we are actually, I mean, I wasn't also kind of taught. I mean, it's not just that I'm blaming, but I never got familiar with this idea. Like I thought, okay, this is how it is. It's going to be good. It's going to be good. But then, reality hits you hard on your face. And I think those moments are the ones that decide the next course of your life, the remaining journey of your life.
There was sort of an unrealistic expectation almost from the get-go. I don't know about you, but I was expected to be successful and to be happy and to be all of these things without necessarily being taught how to be and without actually necessarily being given the support that I needed to be those things, without the resources to be doing those things, and certainly without being taught how to have the kind of supportive, nurturing, encouraging relationship with myself that would actually allow me to do all those kinds of things that were expected of me. So then you just, I don't know, I had this kind of like, if I will it, if I try hard enough, if I just suck it up, then somehow I will be able to live up to all of those things. And it just really doesn't work like that. Most people who are successful, they have a foundation of a relationship with themselves, a supportive relationship within society, and they know how to access the resources that allow them to be successful in the different areas of their lives that they want to be.
Mm, mm. And why? How exactly does it look like in daily life? When someone has that connection with themselves, like are there any signs or any like behavioral um signs or like traits or characteristics that you have
You know,
experienced? Mm-hmm.
since publishing The Light Switch Myth, I've been to some fairs and some different events, and my opener is, "Do you like to read?" And if I get a yes, I'm like, "Oh, do you ever notice yourself being hard on yourself?" And then it's very interesting because there's a group of people that don't and are not hard on themselves, and then we have a conversation, and usually they've had a very strong, supportive, nurturing upbringing that really taught them how to value themselves, and that was reflected and mirrored from those around them. And then there's the other group of people who are tend to be hard on themselves, and you know, um, in those public settings, we can't fully explore that, but I have a pretty good idea. It's like those things weren't mirrored to us. We were taught to prioritize other people. We were taught that it was like self-indulgent or selfish to prioritize our own feelings, and quite frankly, as children, if we are not mirrored that value and that sense of self, and taught how to have that really supportive, loving, caring, unconditional, compassionate relationship with ourselves, it's very unlikely we're gonna figure that out on our own. We might run into, people that treat us like that later in life, and then that can mirror us and give us the foundation we need to start to shift that relationship with ourselves to reflect those things more.
Mm, yeah, makes sense. Makes sense. Okay, and let's all now move on to mindfulness and the relationship with trauma. And I think um it is often recommended. Mindfulness is often recommended as a universal solution for mental health. But then I mean, for people with anxiety or PTSD, trauma, I mean, slowing down or maybe trying to analyze what is happening right now in the present or turning inward, it can actually feel unsafe because they just want to move away, kind of, from it. From your experience, Charisma, what when does mindfulness help and when then it can become counterproductive?
Okay, so honestly, in my experience, if you have a trauma history, if your internal world is full of difficult things that you have needed to turn away from in order to survive and cope, then it's very likely that you need some sort of support. You need to be resourced. Counselors will often talk about a stabilization phase prior to like doing the deep work.
Mm,
So you need to have this sense of safety in the present, which can be mindfulness can be one of the tools to do that. Grounding techniques and other sorts of things can help you be in the present. But honestly, like having some support, some qualified support, in my opinion, to really start to get close to the things that are really uncomfortable inside is highly recommended, in my opinion. Like I'll often talk about I had one counselor and within society, I got told, that breathing was the end all be all to would solve all my problems. But anytime I tried to breathe, it put me in my body, and I was dissociative and I wasn't in my body. So if I would do the breathing exercises, things would get a lot worse, and they would get to a level that I couldn't actually deal with. So that wasn't a safe strategy for me. There were other techniques that worked. So often too, in that situation, we're trying to do what we're told and not necessarily listening to or valuing the feedback our own bodies and stuff is giving. And it wasn't after the fact that I kind of came to understand, like, if my if everything in me was screaming like breathing's not a good idea for me, then that was because I wasn't ready to face what was there because it wasn't resourced enough. And when I talk about resource, that can be a combination of a relationship with ourselves, having support of others in our lives, and sometimes that's education and other kinds of things. But we need to have a little bit of stability and security in and support in our lives to be able to do some of that deeper work, in my opinion.
A quick pause for you listening listeners. If this conversation is already giving you language for what you feel inside, or if you feel it's helping you see your patterns with a little less shame, hit follow. All right, back to it. No, I agree. I agree. And I think this also challenges the idea that discomfort always means growth. And I think sometimes um, discomfort is information, not like a hurdle to override.
Yeah, well, it's funny if you were to go to a party, right?
Mhm.
And your nervous system and your spider says was screaming, "Not safe, not safe." And, whether there was a bunch of aggressive people or whatever, but you got the sense that, like, "This is not a good place for me to be." You would probably get yourself out of there, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Well, our body gives us the same kind of clues, when we're working with ourselves and going to look at that material that's inside. And if it's screaming like not safe, well, then maybe we want to listen. And that doesn't mean that we never go there, but that maybe we need to get some help or to strategize like, okay, how can I access this material? I love the word titrate because it is like, to sort of put a little baby toe into the water and
Mm.
see how it is, but to learn that we need to learn how to like go into the material and come out of the material and go into the material and come out. And that can create a sense of safety. And not that for some of us, what we have to face on the inside doesn't get completely overwhelming and terrifying at times. It does, but we can create resources within ourselves and within our support system that allows us to like for me, I can be in an episode of PTSD, say, in therapy, and it can seem like I am right back there as like say a 6-year-old experiencing things that a 6-year-old shouldn't, that were completely unbearable and intolerable. And it can feel like that, but I have somebody, including myself, that reminds me like, hey, it's 2026, you're actually 55 years old, you're safe, you're feeling this stuff. This stuff is coming up, this stuff is coming up and you're facing it now because you're actually safe enough to. And I could also look back at my past with compassionate lens and know like, okay, yes, I wish I had been able to heal this stuff when I was 20 so that it had less of an impact on my life overall. But I actually wasn't ready. I didn't have the resources around me or the ability within myself to um, to look at this material in the way that I can now. And not that it isn't difficult now, it really is. But there is this sense of safety that's hard to describe. That's like, okay, I am able to do this. I have a lot of different skills and resources available to me.
Mhm.
But then, just really, really respecting our own limits and that own inner voice that says, like, I'm not going there. And then not to listen to it forever, but to heed that, like, okay,
Mm. That's true. That's absolutely right. And that's exactly what it is. I mean, um, like people would blame themselves, when a technique does not work for them, and it would feel like exactly like I am the problem here. Maybe there's no solution out there for me. So I think it also kind of it doesn't dismiss the idea that, uh, you have to follow or you have to agree to something that is working for everyone else out there. And I think that uniqueness has to be respected. It has to be celebrated. It has to be accepted, first of all. And before even acceptance, I think it has to be made aware about.
Think that's an important part of, like, whether it's a coaching relationship or a counseling relationship is we need to learn to step out of, a lot of us survivors had a people-pleasing and a fawn response or a freeze response, and so we actually do need to, slowly, because as we're talking, it can be difficult, have that attunement to self to sort of understand and be willing to speak up and say, like, "No, I don't wanna do that," or "I'm not ready to do that," or "It would be better for this way." To be open to the guidance that we're receiving, but to mix that with our own intuitive knowing so that whatever process we're engaging in, it's one that's personalized for us and that respects us. It's the same as boundaries with another person. If you're constantly walking over somebody else's boundaries, that's not gonna end up being a very good relationship, you know?
Mm, yep. And you emphasize on gentle support rather than intense self work. So, I mean, I'd love for you to share three gentle ways, like people can begin connecting with themselves.
Okay, yeah, I wanted to, yeah, and I will just say, my approach for a couple of decades was like,
Mhm.
I would dive into the deep end. I I would get so, uh shocked basically by what I had dove into that I wasn't able to stay present or connected with myself. And I used to think of it like an electric fence. I'm trying to get over this wall. I'd hit the electric fence. I'd get thrown back 20 feet. Actually kind of forget what it was that I had been doing for a while. Then I would remember, oh, right, I'm looking at this. I'm trying to do this. And then I would do the same thing. I would run at the electric fence, get shot back. So then now I've kind of learned, like, let's walk up to the wall slowly. Let's, like, create some steps to gently climb over it. Let's recognize that this is difficult. Let's support ourselves along the way. So, here are some of those ways that I've learned how to do that. One thing that I do or and have done that has been, quite helpful for me is it's just a checking in, and if you can only do this once a day, then you can only do this once a day, and if you can only do this once a week, then you can only do this once a week. But it's a habit that if you can start to sort of gently turn towards, it can be quite empowering, and it's just like you pause, you take a breath if you're able to, could be any kind of breath, right? Um, and then we're just doing a little bit of a body scan, and we're gonna ask ourselves, how am I in this moment? And you might want to close your eyes. And if you're comfortable with that, you might not. But we're just gonna sort of check in. Where's my energy levels at? Am I feeling afraid? Am I feeling stressed? Um, is there physical, like, are my shoulders tense? Does my back hurt? What am I what's going on in my body? Are my thoughts racing? Are they calm? Am I kind of feeling kind of spacey? Like there's all these different ways where that they can kind of check in and get like a sort of an assessment of where we're at in the moment. And that's all we have to do. We're just starting to build awareness of, like, checking in with ourselves and starting to kind of, like, notice some of those things. And that could be part of, like, coming out of dissociation, that could be part of getting back into our bodies, that can be part of attunement, but it's just a very simple thing. And, kinda to make a joke. It's kind of funny, but maybe too much information, but you know what? We all have to go to the bathroom at least one time a day, right? And we sit there and we actually, like, it's kind of a grounding thing because we have a minute, right?
Mhm.
And you have to be somewhat present to be able to process your bodily functions. So it's actually a great time to do a little bit of a body scan to check in with your emotions, your energy, and your physical sensations, right? Because you just
Mhm.
you just have that second, and I believe in habit stacking. So where we get that one, even if you're a mom or have like a really busy, active kind of life, you usually are going to the bathroom by yourself. So you have that 1 to 4 or 5 minutes to yourself where you can just do that gentle kind of check in.
Mm. No, I think that's a very good idea. It's kind of, squeezing in or maybe kind of clubbing in two activities together. Um, sometimes like this is something that I used to do. I mean, of course, now I'm not surrounded by many people all the time, but then especially when you are in that, hustle and bustle of surrounded by people or families. My quiet place has always been, going to washroom and getting those 2 minutes of silence. Like, I'm just there. And
But it's true, right?
and like here only I am. Nobody's watching me, seeing me. I mean, yeah, listeners don't interpret that in a bad way, but it's just, that silence. Um, and then yeah, of course, as Kerisma, you suggested, like, noticing, doing a check-in there. And just trying to feel in what is going on in my body. Where am I feeling the stress in there? Maybe my shoulders are paining, maybe my knees are paining, maybe my fingers are feeling numb, something like that.
Yeah, part two, I don't want to complicate it for people, but
Mhm.
part two for me is like in that moment, seriously, this is when I would do it because, I wanted the adding the compassion because like pretty much every time I did that check in with myself, I was struggling in some way. There was stuff going on in the background, and I think of it as the foreground in the background. There was stuff going on in the background, and I was either scared or I was tired or I was worried or I was anxious. Those feelings always were there, and for me, I would actually take that moment in the washroom to just say, "I love you. I know it's hard right now. I love you." And, like that to me was the beginning of the real compassionate, um, learning to respond to myself with compassion, because first I would be acknowledging what those feelings and sensations were, and then I would be responding to it with just like a little bit of love, in that couple of moments that I had in that room. And it started to make a big difference because
Mm,
when you start to treat yourself that way, it doesn't make your struggles go away, but it helps you get through them differently.
exactly. No doubt. No doubt.
Um,
Mhm.
Another thing I have that's even like a lot simpler. So when people are feeling stuck or overwhelmed or like they just can't, feeling very frozen in their efforts towards whatever kind of change they're trying to make or healing they're trying to make, is I have used ideally, we want to be able to take steps forward, but sometimes we can't. So in those moments, what I do is I actually just picture my feet pointing forward with no pressure to take any kind of step or whatever. I might be lying in my bed watching TV, but I have this visual images. It's like, okay, I'm just gonna point my feet in the right direction, and that's gonna be enough in this moment. And it's true. It creates this whole kind of environment that, instead of me feeling like I'm going backwards or I'm failing or whatever, I've done this tiny little action that requires like nothing more than to just like make a little mental image of pointing my feet forward. And that can really help with my feelings of overwhelm and pressure and all the rest of that.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you. Thank you for, sharing, I think, these ways or, small practices. And I think none of them, none of these are, they are not about fixing or optimizing. Like they don't talk about efficiency. They're more about listening, pacing, and giving our nervous system the permission to feel safer over time.
Well, did you ever notice that when you're around somebody that treats you like that, how much you relax and how much you
Mm,
breathe and how much things just become a little bit easier? That's what That's what support when we are seen and heard and nothing's expected of us. We're just met where we're at. Then, like that becomes the environment that is more supportive um, to us meeting ourselves where we're at and then creating any kind of change that we might be wanting to.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Charisma, before we wrap up, if listeners they would further like to connect with you, and if they have any of their thoughts, their opinions after this conversation, how they can do it.
Oh, you can Google Charisma Vere, and then you can reach out to me through the multimedia platforms. I'm everywhere. You could go to Towards Wellness Coaching and you can find me there. And I did just want to add in, Santa, that I have
Mm,
just published the Ways I Showed Up for Myself Self Gratitude, a 60-day practice. And it's a little bit deeper than what we just talked about in but whether you do it with the journal that I published, which I made super accessible, and affordable, but whether you do it with that journal, which is kind of like a real simple starting spot, or you just, do it on a piece of paper with your sheet, the idea is at the end of the day, when we tend to be critical and we're in threat mode and we're thinking about our day from a place of like, "Oh, no, what didn't I do?" or "What do I need to be worried about?" and all that sort of stuff, we start to rewire our brains to look at where did I show up for myself, you know?
mm,
What was something that I did that was a little bit brave? Where did I maintain something? Where did I let something go? What was hard for me? What was meaningful for me? We start to have this starts to rewire our brain and it starts to develop that attunement. And it might be a little bit gentler than the physical checking in with our sensations and thoughts because it can be a little bit cognitive and
mm,
it's a way to offer ourselves some acknowledgement and validation, which then can help buffer some of that discomfort of being with ourselves because we're starting to have a more supportive and encouraging relationship with ourselves. And I know this practice was particularly transformative for me. I'm back to doing it, and it just the thing is that you can do it in point form, and it can take 5 to 10 minutes at the end of the day, and it's a game changer for how you look at your life and for the kind of quality of rest that you might get, and which then sets you up to start the next day in a better place too.
amazing, amazing. Congratulations for that, Charisma. And listeners, what I'm gonna do is have all the links mentioned in the show notes, as I always do, to make it easier for you to reach out to Charisma and check out all of her resources and connect with her as well. And I just want to reflect, listeners, something back. Like healing, it does not have to be performative, dramatic, visible, or impressive. Maybe sometimes it looks like learning how to pause, or maybe it looks like choosing not to abandon yourself when things feel uncomfortable. And I believe today's conversation it reminds us that mental health is not about becoming someone new, but it is often about becoming safer with who you already are. And Charisma, thank you so much. This was really, really a very, very important and crucial conversation. Thank you for bringing this up.
Thanks, I like that. It is about becoming safer to be who we are and meet ourselves where we are. That's so beautifully put.
And to all the listeners, if this conversation stirred something in you, take that as information, not a task. You do not need to rush. You matter exactly where you are. Until next time, this has been the Mindful Living in Ansana, and thank you for being here. I'll see you in the next episode. Thank you.